presentation. And I think we've got a good what, what is the wicked problem that is in fact the theme of this entire get-together and more. I'm going to talk more about how. And I'm going to start with one word, which actually is the beginning and the end and the summary of everything that I want to share with you, which is imagination. It's the word that Joaquin closed his comments with last night, and I'm going to open with that word, with imagination, with imagine now. So it's not just a word from a famous John Lennon song. It's also something that each one of us knows how to do, because imagination is the ability to conceive of things that we can't necessarily prove with our senses. It's knowledge that we have, but we don't know how we got it. In a word, it's our intuitive capabilities, which are wired into who we are as human beings. So when Jennifer talks about generating ideas, ideas begin with a spark that can't necessarily be proven with rational analytical means. It's like being at a dance or at a club where you see somebody interesting across the room. And the first thing you probably do, well, actually, the first thing you probably don't do is take out your calipers or your rulers or your standard metrics table and say, this person kind of fits with the available analytical evidence about what a person of, an interesting complexion should look like. You go over there and you talk to them and you take a risk and you find out, in fact, whether there was something interesting or not. So imagination is about courage. It's about risk-taking, and it's about envisioning possibility. Let's imagine that this environmental crisis that we are now embroiled in is in fact resolved by a portfolio of ideas, principally from younger, smarter people who are inheriting a world that is a bit of a mess, but who are able to come up with constructive ways of addressing these challenges. And not just whiz-bang technology, but behavioral economics, social science, psychology, ways of changing behavior. Let's imagine that. Let's sit back for a second and imagine a world in which climate change is not the kind of existential threat that every day it appears to be more and more. Or let's imagine a world in which Donald Trump is president of the United States. Well, maybe we shouldn't go there. But again, this is the value of creating these kind of mental thought experiments, activating your imagination, all right? So we have these wicked problems. Wicked problems are defined in the literature as problems that are so big and complicated that they're hard to address by conventional rational means. If your car catches on fire, you have a problem. You go test drive some cars, you do some market research, and then you pick a car. It's a very rational, linear process. But addressing the environment, issues of violence, poverty, social justice, these are wicked problems, and wicked problems require innovation for their resolution. I've been following the thread of how innovation is practiced for some 30 years. I was a professor at Harvard Business School for 14 years. I was a producer of films in Hollywood. I did film theater production on Broadway. I started companies in Silicon Valley. I've advised governments, I've advised private companies, entrepreneurs on how to make these things happen. So the journey has been very much about imagining actually that innovation isn't just a bumper sticker or an exhortation, what I like to call the hand waving. So many leaders, when they talk about innovation in their organizations, they say, well, be more innovative, take more risks. We appreciate great ideas. Well, fine, but is that the be-all and end-all of how to actually do innovation? I said at the top that I was going to talk about how. And the how of innovation, the practice of innovation, I think what you're here to share experiences about in terms of the how to address these wicked problems isn't just a mood or encouragement. It actually comes from practice, from doing it over and over again, and from understanding deeply what the component skills and capabilities of innovation are. Innovation's this big kind of grown-up word, which, I guarantee you, if you got 10 innovation experts in a room, you'd get about 7 different answers as to what innovation is, right? So a lot of what I've been doing over the last few years is taking this subject of innovation and trying to deconstruct it into its component parts so that it would be learnable, it would be teachable, and it would be practical, right? So if you think about it, the dictionary defines innovation as creativity applied to some purpose to realize value. Creativity applied to some purpose to realize value, or imagination applied to some purpose to realize value. And I thought that was a pretty good definition for a long time, but I have another one that I want to share with you, which is innovation is the set of capacities that allows for the continuous realization of a desired future. Now think about that for a second. We're not talking about moods, exhortations. We're talking about capacities that continuously help you to realize a desired future. So a lot of what EdgeMakers is about is a way of linking creativity to purpose, as well as a way of making innovation learnable. And when I said deconstructing it into its component parts, let me just do that very quickly for you, because ideas spring up from the human imagination. So there's a whole ideation, brainstorming, psychological dimension to innovation. And it's not just what happens in between your ears, it's what happens when you interact with somebody else and you either encourage or inhibit their thinking. It happens in teams. It happens in organizations. One of the big soap operas in business now is Apple getting less creative, right? Well, that's an interesting question. And then it also happens in countries. It happens in societies, which either have the capital and the freedom and the resources to make innovation happen or don't, to support new ideas. And then at the other end, there's entrepreneurship, which is the realization of value from ideas. It's what happens when you take an idea, hopefully fully formed, to market, and either something happens in terms of an economic exchange and a social value exchange, because there's social entrepreneurship as well, or it doesn't. And in the middle, there are a whole bunch of intermediate disciplines, what I would call the enablers or the amplifiers of the idea, ways that you develop the idea. So you've probably heard a lot about design thinking, right? Designers, descended from industrial designers, know a lot about how to put a form on ideas. What's the first thing that a designer does? They make a prototype. You got an idea, I'm going to make a model, and then we're going to look at the model and figure out whether we are aligned, whether we have something to talk about or not. There is storytelling, narrative development, okay? If I have a great idea, let's say I have the best idea since sliced bread about how to change people's behavior to make them more sustainable. Doesn't mean anything unless I can share that idea in a way that motivates somebody else, or preferably a lot of other people, maybe I'm using social media or whatever, to buy into my idea so their behavior changes as well. So storytelling, as we're beginning to see it as an academic discipline, isn't just some cool, nice, bohemian thing to do. It actually is about the fundamentals of making change. Having started companies in Silicon Valley a number of times, you got to go and persuade investors to buy into your idea, people to change their lives and work for you, so you have to have a story. And they often say you got to start with an elevator story, right? Well, the buildings in Silicon Valley are very low. Most of them have like 2 stories, maybe 3, so you better talk really fast. You better have a really good story that, is sticky and viral and all of those good kind of things. What other enabling factors are there, right? Well, there's digital literacy and fluency, right? These days, and this organization is a great example of leveraging digital technology and social media to create impact. But the issues go beyond that, because it's also about, how do you tell the difference between truth and falsehood on the internet? How do you use the internet in a sort of ethical way to create influence and to do the good work? There are collaborative skills. There are, personal character strengths that enable the work of innovation to take place. So I hope what I've done is kind of set the table for you, because just being a kind of a new student of One Young World, a lot of what you are all about is unleashing your imagination, unleashing your creativity to be able to produce positive effects in the world. And so to that end, you are all innovators by definition. I mean, to be creative is human. You all have creative ideas. But how you shape those ideas, how you convert those ideas into value are skill sets, right? And you get to practice those here and share best practices around that. Let me make the notion of capacities really clear for you. You know, one thing that you may not know about me is I'm very big on music. I wrote a book a long time ago called Jamming, which was about what can leaders learn from jazz musicians. And so the metaphor that I like to use is jazz piano playing because, you know, if, for instance, you know, I said to our hosts and co-founders here, well, in my remaining 7 minutes, there's something else we're going to do, which is you guys are going to do a jazz piano concert. And we're going to do all the things that, you know, good managers do. We're going to applaud, we're going to cheer, they're going to bring out the Steinway that they have in the lobby. You know, we're going to tell them that the value statement of One Young World includes, you know, not worrying about risk, taking chances, and, you know, expressing yourself, and so forth and so on. Did I say we were all going to applaud? Then we'll show them a PowerPoint presentation about how to play jazz. There'll be a couple of lectures about how to play jazz. And what's my point? My point is that unless they've been practicing in secret for 10 years, learning the mechanics of jazz harmony, jazz traditions, they're not going to be able to, in their case, probably 5 years, because they're really smart people. But you know, you get my point. Innovation isn't a mood, it's capacity building. It's learnable, teachable skills. It's a set of disciplines. And so that's why we're having our, there's a workshop that's going to happen as well on Saturday from, I think, 4 to 5, which is actually about the practice of what we in my office in San Francisco called edge making, which is basically a mashup of all of the skills related to innovation that I just mentioned. And of course, we won't be able to go through all of them in an hour, but I think what we can do is begin to give you some of the tools and some of the frameworks, you know, sort of a tasting menu, if you will, of how we look at the actual practice of innovation and how you can take your feelings about the what, you know, these horrific, wicked problems out there in the world, and harness creativity to purpose, you know, I mean, in a way that I think the whole world is counting on for you to be able to express. I have a colleague here, Dara Wessling, if you want to stand up for a second. So Dara is the executive director of something called the Edge Makers Institute, and she and another colleague named Amy Booker will be with you on, well, she'll be here all during the conference, but they will be running the workshop on Saturday, where you can get a little bit more of a deep sample on what the edge-making approach is all about. I unfortunately have to dash out of here, but I will give you my email address, which is very easy to remember. It's john@johnko.com, no periods. I mean, except, yeah, no periods, except between John, Ko, and com, which is the traditional period. So if you have any questions about anything I've said, please feel free to be in touch with me. I must say, I feel very happy that I had the chance to share this time with you. I have an almost missionary zeal to be with people like yourselves who I hope now feel like you're in the hot seat to express your innovation in some dramatic and useful ways, that innovation becomes the how of what you're trying to do. And there's no hard and fast kind of lifestyle pathways to this. You know, I mean, I learned as much from jazz or from making movies as I did from being an academic expert on innovation. I think each of you brings who you are, what you believe in, what you're passionate about to the tasks of making innovation real, making it tangible, so that we will realize the benefits for all of us. So, you know, I close with the word that I opened with, which is imagine, dare to imagine, and hopefully you can apply some of this in the days to come. Thank you very much.